This is the normal time now. I was teaching a class for the past couple of weeks at this time, and it just had to be at that time. But now we're good. Now we're good. We're back to the normal time. So happy to be back at 10:30 a.m. EST. But yeah, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to come up with new ideas. To always be an idea factory, essentially. To always be able to create, essentially on demand. Um, it's not always easy to come up with just idea after idea after idea on demand, and it's funny, because this directly relates to my channel, right? I'm constantly creating new videos, and I'm actually doing 2 videos a week now, and then plus this live stream, and so you might sometimes ask, and I actually wondered before, can I really always have good, fresh ideas? And the answer, I believe it's really yes. I think it's really yes, and this may relate to you with respect to your, whatever projects you're working on, whatever aspect of your life, especially, let's say if you're an artist, a creator, also an entrepreneur, somebody in the professional world doing something technical like the sciences or engineering, you always need new and fresh ideas. It's very, very important, and a lot of people don't think about those industries or those fields as creative. But if you are an engineer, you're a coder, you're somebody who works in the sciences, you understand, you always need new creative ideas. And Akash, welcome. Hi, how you doing? And before we move on, I do want to give a shout out to the new channel members: Steven Steele, Better Name, which is an interesting name, Barry Elrod, Abdul Musa, and Walter McLean. So welcome, guys. Welcome our new members, our recent members, channel members. But I wanted to give you guys a shout out. Yeah, so how do you control the process of coming up with ideas? It's not like you can sit there and just think, okay, well, just think, sit on your bed or sit at the table and write and come up with new ideas. In fact, have you ever been writing something? I'm sure you've had the experience. You've been writing something, you've been sitting there thinking, okay, what is a good idea to write about, right? Or maybe it's not writing. Maybe it's that you're even in a conversation with somebody and you're trying to come up with, well, what do we talk about? What do we discuss? What do we talk about? And you feel like you have nothing to talk about. You have nothing interesting to discuss. Well, that's a big problem, right? I mean, nowadays especially, people will tend to pay attention to you more if you have some idea that they haven't heard of before. They'll feel that that's insightful, right? And so how do you, just when you're talking, when you're writing, you're sitting there, how do you always come up with some sort of ideas? And I'm not patting myself on the back here, but when I'm in conversation with people, I'll often realize, oh wow, did I just say what I said? I can't believe I remembered that fact from like 4 years ago, or from 10 years ago when I was studying this or that. I can't believe I remembered, putting those two things together like that. I can't believe it, right? So, and it always comes back to me, and then, I believe that the other person who I'm talking to ends up feeling that that was insightful in some way. So how can you always have that effect, have that impact? All right. Well, it's a few things that I do that I found that are incredibly effective, over time. After writing lots of scripts and always writing scripts, you guys know, on a daily basis. Best piece of fiction you have read or watched, Akash? Oh, good question. I'll come back to that. But actually, it's related to what we're talking about. So after writing lots of scripts, after writing writing academic work that I've done, after reading a lot, after having so many conversations, really, really great conversations with people, having traveled to many different places, not as many as I want still, but I believe that there are several ingredients. So let's talk about this for a moment. One is exactly kind of what you said, Akash. Yes, it's reading books, and it's reading not just nonfiction, but I have to be better at this too, because I do read some fiction, not enough. I think not enough fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of technical stuff and philosophical stuff and just a lot of science based information, and so I I need to get better myself at reading fiction, but um, and I do. I have favorite poems and poetry, um, but let me actually answer your question. Best fiction. Oh, that's actually really, really hard. Why don't you tell me what is the best fiction you have read or watched? Because it's that may give me some ideas. And then to this point, to this point, that's a great point. All right, this is the first ingredient. When you hear other people share their ideas, when you actually have conversations like this, you you get ideas. I'll give you some insight into a lot of my creation process here. I actually get a lot of Reverend Insanity. Okay, I'll check it out. So you have to so yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm really tired. Last week I was sick, right? I think I told you guys. Wait, did I mention? Yeah. Last week I was sick. I was starting to get sick, and then I got sick for the rest of the week, very, very sick, and then I recovered. But it's like I'm still, and I'm going to the gym and everything, and I'm working out, but I'm still feeling just a little bit tired, like the leftover of all of that. So, Piyush, welcome. You said how to develop critical thinking. You know, it's a really open-ended question, Piyush, and I do have several videos that I've talked about. In fact, I have a live stream on that topic that I did not too long ago. So yeah, welcome to Kill. Yeah, because now I'm doing them earlier, right? I'm doing them at the normal time, what I would say the normal time. But Piyush, we'll look out for more videos coming up on. I have a video coming up on critical thinking, and also how to think like a data scientist, like different videos on this. But if you have a more specific question about critical thinking, about how to think through some specific topic, that might be more helpful. Because if you give me, right, so let me put it this way. If anybody gives me a general question, I'll give you a very general answer, right? And it might not be that helpful, right? But it's fair if I give you a general answer to a general question, right? So try to think of a specific question or something specific that you're working on. Otherwise, I can give you general tools. But let's focus on the best idea. Just a guest. Hey, how you doing? Welcome. So I get a lot of insight, or I get a lot of insight daily, not daily, weekly, just from doing these lives with you. Because guess what? I'm having a conversation. Of course, I have conversations with friends, right? You know, but we're all busy, right? You don't always have a conversation. At least I don't have conversations with friends of mine every single week. Sometimes I'm just very busy, right? But my here's what I do. Obviously, I do these live streams every week, and I have conversations. I'm clarifying ideas. You know, I just every week I told you I jump on ChatGPT and I use the voice chat feature, and I have a conversation with it as if it's a human, right? And I try to challenge, you know, explore different connections between different ideas that I have been reading about or have been researching about. It's very, very helpful for that creation process, right? It's not just the technical skills, though. It's not just the technical skills. Yeah, let me actually get to that. It's not that. So yes, actually, Akash, this is good. And Nikhil, so let me read both your comments. So Nikhil, if we question everything, so would we experience instability, like you make, plan, and keep change it because you are questioning. Yeah, well, there's a balance in questioning, and actually, yes, I'm going to talk about that. Thoughts on Machiavellian mindsets or approach? Okay. Now you guys are getting into what I wanted to segue into. Is it's not just the skills for coming up with ideas, it's the it's an attitude, and it's the same attitude for critical thinking, right? So Nikhil, yes, you know, critical thinking, as I see it, is just an attitude, right? Is just an attitude. It is not just an attitude. It comes down to an attitude. Because Nikhil, when you study with respect to, sorry, still a little brain fog because guess what, guys? I'm still recovering from being sick a little bit, so I'm just so tired. But anyway, so bear with me. When you look at critical thinking at a really deep level, right, Nikhil, you can see that there are so many different methods and approaches. Anybody who tells you that there's one approach to critical thinking, one logical approach or something, one methodological approach, they're either lying or they don't know what they're talking about. Because when you get into, for instance, probability and statistics, you find there are frequentist approaches, there are Bayesian approaches, and those are only two popular approaches. There are more approaches, more schools of thought when it comes to probability. When you get into logic, you find that there are several types of logic. There's not just, propositional logic. When you get into, so when you get into different subjects, you find that there are different methods of analysis. So because there are so many different methods of analysis, yes, Nikhil, it can lead to a lot of doubt. And I'm going to talk about this in an upcoming video. And that's why, most importantly, the most important aspect of critical thinking is this attitude of humility, and also attitude of courage. It's courage, right? And this is a longer conversation, so watch the video on that, because, yeah, technically critical thinking can lead to immense self-doubt, but how do you overcome the self-doubt component and actually take action and don't get stuck in analysis paralysis? It's a really great question. But let me read some of your, I want to get back on the ideas concept in a moment, but thoughts on Machiavellian mindsets or approach. So Machiavellian mindsets, Akash, Machiavellianism is, realpolitik, consider realpolitik. Now, I'm happy to debate anybody on this. But Machiavellianism is pretty stupid. So I'll be very blunt about that. Although Machiavelli has been there, technically, I think he has been misinterpreted a lot. It's actually fair to say that what Machiavelli was showing he wasn't necessarily prescribing those ideas. He was just showing that that's how Italian politics worked at the time. He was just showing that that's how it works, and this is how Italian politics was. However, here's why Machiavellianism, in terms of the prescription of Machiavellianism, doesn't work. It's actually just stupid. It's sorry, for lack of a better word, it's stupid, because it is not a good explanation of human behavior. Right? You might look at it and say, and I did this when I analyzed Robert Greene's books, right? You've seen maybe videos on me analyzing Robert Greene's books. There's no real basis to say that the way we see behavior playing out in geopolitics, even historically, is the way it is naturally run, something like that. There, if anything, right, because of prehistory, human prehistory is older than human history. From prehistory to even within documented history, there are more instances, arguably more instances, or at least as many instances of egalitarian societies and cooperative societies as there are or as there have been, highly hierarchical chattel slavery type societies. So whoever focuses on these aspects of human nature, so to speak, I put it in heavy quotes because I don't think there's such a thing as, I think human nature is too reductionistic. So I'm skeptical of the concept of human nature to begin with. But human nature itself doesn't go one way or another. It's highly dependent on circumstances, maybe levels of development, cultural factors, economic factors, geographic factors, as the work of David Stisavage of NYU, he has done some great work looking at the geographic factors of political development, for instance. And so it's not me having wishful thinking. Yeah, am I biased? I'm biased because I would like the world to be more peaceful and cooperative. Yes, I'm biased. I will admit that. Sure. I would like the world to be more ethical. However, on the other end, looking at human nature as this Machiavellian enterprise, well, we don't have enough evidence. If you might say, oh, look at all the evidence around it. Well, when you do an analysis, when we do any analysis, we have to, like, the most objective and unbiased way to do an analysis is to choose all the data points that we can that are an example of that phenomenon, right? If we cherry pick the ones that we want, right, we will end up with something that, Robert Greene's conclusions, right? We have to be very cynical about human behavior and all of that. But if we take into consideration all the data points throughout history and even prehistory, which it's not that easy to do with prehistory, that's why it's called prehistory, then we can see that a more even-handed picture, right? It's not so clear-cut to say, political interaction is just a game of one-upsmanship and conniving and trying to outsmart your opponent and everything. It's just not that simple. It's not that simple. So, but yeah. So Akash. So it's basically impractical in real life. Yeah, in a way, pragmatism versus morality. So I believe strongly that. And you may call it idealistic. I don't call it idealistic, but I don't think it's idealistic at all. I think it's very practical. When you do study history and you take into consideration all the data points, I believe it's very practical to develop moral societies or ethical societies. What does that mean, right? Because that could be very highly biased ethical societies, right? What does that mean? Well, that's different live stream, different video, different discussion. We can discuss that if you want, but that's my belief, and we should work toward that. We're not there now. We're a very long way from there now, but in many ways, we have done much better than in the past. In many ways, but we're not. Obviously, we're far away from what I would consider an ethical society. So, sir, I think critical thinking is developed through asking questions like what, why, and how. Yeah. So, Piyush, yes. I actually teach. I'll tell you, and this goes on to this ties into our idea of our theme here today of developing ideas. I actually teach a class that's a group class, a small group class, among high school kids, right? And I do it online. I do it by Zoom, just private clients. And one thing that we're working on is essay writing skills. And one thing that I push them to do, I'm really adamant about it. I say, here's a research topic, right? Here's a research topic. Here's a research idea. Here's something that I want you to write about, but I want you to take a position on that topic. You don't have, so for instance, the most recent one was like the consumption of fast food and the effects of fast food on health. I tell them, you don't think that I expect you to write an essay on why fast food is bad for you. If you can make the case that if you do research and you come to the conclusion that no, fast food is actually good for you and it's good for society or whatever, right, and all those things, then good. make the contrarian case. Make the contrarian case. But, and I tell them, you can have whatever opinion you want, right? You can have whatever opinion you want. However, we're all accountable to our opinions too, meaning we have to provide evidence and we have to provide a compelling argument. We can't just have whatever opinion. We have to back it up with the appropriate evidence, good sources, and there's an objective way of finding good sources. You know, there are such a thing as objectively good sources and bad sources, and I teach them that, right? How do you find good sources? So I train them with the critical thinking approach in mind. I think a lot of times when people are teaching essay writing, it's just all technical skills, but when you're coming up with ideas, critical thinking is a really powerful way to come up with new ideas, because, you know, think outside the box. Don't think how people are all thinking, right? Feel free to explore. It doesn't mean when you explore mentally an idea, it doesn't mean you have to accept it. It means you're exploring, right? You're probing. You're saying, does this work? You know, most people are saying this, but what if I explore this alternative viewpoint? Does that actually work? Let me look into the evidence. Let me look into the the logical argument about it, right? And then, you know, and then come to your own conclusion. And one reason I think there are so many. Well, let me read your, Akash, how manage so many things like you centralized tasks, because whenever I try to do something, I get overwhelmed. Okay, let me come back to that. I can't understand why fast food is bad at all. Bread is healthy, tomatoes healthy, cabbage is healthy, so burgers is healthy. Yeah, so if you want to make that argument, you can. But the thing is that these are overly processed, highly processed things. They have lots of preservatives in them. That's, you know, that's the idea. There are a lot of reasons. For instance, meat in the U.S. is like very bad. You know, if you look into the process of how it's the standards, our standards for meat production in the U.S. are very very low standards compared to the rest of the world. You know, but in terms of it, you know, compared to the rest of the developed world, I guess you might say. But so here, what was I going to say? But that's my opinion, right? I think I have good reasons to say that. But what was I going to say here? But that's also how you come up with new ideas, right? You have to challenge, you have to try and probe other ideas, mainstream ideas, you know. The problem is, I think one of the reasons people fall into extremism and extreme positions, and they sit there and they accept extremism or extreme positions, is partially because, I wouldn't blame it all on this, but partially because of a culture of kind of being dictated to of a certain position. And so that's why I tell my kids, you know, if I told my kids, you know, you have to argue why is fast food unhealthy. Well, what if I don't want to argue why fast food is unhealthy? What if I want to take a different position? Well, I leave them free to do that. And I really believe that a free mind, a mind that is left to wander and consider all viewpoints and then collect the evidence and then believe maybe the right position, that mind is going to be less resistant to ultimately what you might consider the correct position or the well-supported position. So I really believe that. So I think we have to encourage that instead of restricting kids, especially, to certain positions. Bohi, yes, is it traditional to become a polymath without a degree, or is it non-traditional? Because Leonardo da Vinci didn't go to college, and I'm also trying to be a polymath without a degree. Oh, man. You're getting onto a good topic. You're actually getting into a good topic, Bohi, so let me come back to that and read Shawnee's comment here. So, hey, Sean, welcome from South Africa. Welcome. Happy to have you here. Bohi, you're pointing to an important question. What is the purpose of education? Really, what Yes, I am World Shaper. Yes, I am familiar with Robert Sapolsky and his book Determined. Yes, I am, and I have thoughts on it. I'm more of a compatibilist. I'm more of a compatibilist for various reasons. I think determinism and free will, that debate, is a really nuanced debate and discussion, and it has to be approached in a really nuanced way. But yeah, actually, I will be discussing determinism and free will in a future video. Um, I disagree. And I respectfully disagree with hard determinism. I respectfully disagree, and I think on very valid scientific grounds. I would actually use very specifically scientific grounds to argue against, well, scientific and also semantic grounds. I'll just address this for a moment, because if we get on this conversation, it'll be the whole topic of the live for the rest of the session, which I want to get back on. I want to get back on Bohi's great point here. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of confusion with respect to the free will debate. I think there's a lot of confusion around the how we use the words choice, determined, free will in the first place. I think there's a lot of semantic confusion around these terms, and that so here's one thing that happens, and I think this is a huge issue in general across the social sciences, but from science, in science in general, and well in science, scientists purposely use scientific terminology, specific vocabulary that is not, as you would say, natural language vocabulary, like probability distribution, likelihood, posteriors, and the G factor, and things like that. And these terms are very helpful, right? Why use these terms instead of natural language terms? For instance, you will very rarely hear in some scientific paper, like, this is causing this, right? It's actually not very often that you'll hear scientists in a scientific paper, in scientific discourse, talk about causation. We talk about statistical association. We talk about strong associations. We'll talk about here and there you might talk about causations, but maybe talk about causal models or causal inference, something like that. But that's where there's actually a disconnect with this deterministic debate, because I would argue, if you really look at just the brute scientific terminology, and you get rid of our natural language terms in this debate with respect to, is this causing, predetermined because of a cause, and do you have choice and all this stuff? Well, if you take away all that terminology, I don't think you have a case for hard determinism, is what I'm saying. So it's a nuanced debate, and certainly there are people who would have a counter argument about that, about my points here, but we'd have to dig in, because I haven't really made a true point, honestly. I'm just suggesting something that might be a problem, right? But I haven't really made a true point yet, but I will. So I'm gonna talk about it. I've been thinking about this topic for a while, and I've been holding off publishing about it because I really wanted to make sure, my thoughts are clear about it, and yeah. So, and I don't just have an opinion and I'm spouting out an opinion that's not really comprehensive. So everything has become scientific because it's now connotation, maybe denotation, or science has become connotative. Maybe the term science has become connotative. I think so, if that's what you mean. Bohi, let's talk about this. So you're talking about the purpose of education. For you want to become a polymath without a degree. Go for it. I don't know if you'd call that traditional or non-traditional. I would say that's non-traditional, probably. I mean, I would say it's more non-traditional, but go for it, because you have to ask, what is the purpose of your education? Aristotle thought the purpose of education was to become a better person. I won't just keep this to the West, because I think there's a huge Western bias. Al-Farabi, right, who, yes, followed maybe in the footsteps of those Greek thinkers, but still had his own really great thought. The thinker Al-Farabi in the Middle East, or what we call the Middle East today. I should maybe we could be more accurate and say it's Asia Minor, right? So, anyway, Al-Farabi, also believed that the highest cultivation of your mind, right? So I also believe that education and knowledge and wisdom is an end in itself, right? Going to school is a matter of your career aspiration. Going to school is utilitarian in a sense, and I don't mean that in the Benthamite utilitarian sense. I mean it in a more colloquial sense. It's more utilitarian to go to school because you get a job, maybe you get a professorship. It's about income, but and people might disagree with me, but it has become, yes, a dual purpose. I think traditionally in the Western world, it's not been tied to income. It's been tied to knowledge and things like that, for its own sake. But yeah, there's this conflict that I do see in education where, we're treating education for its own sake, but then we're also treating it as a means to get an income. I think it's a terrible conflict that we have. I think it's a terrible conflict. How do we resolve that conflict? I don't have a comprehensive answer, but I will say, if you want to be a polymath without going to school, without a degree, yeah, go for it. I think if you can go to school for it and pursue some degree, then it's definitely worthwhile. If you can't, you can also achieve a lot. How do you teach and encourage your students? Muhammad Al-Khatani. Okay, so you're asking me, I hope that doesn't bother you. Do you believe in God? So yeah, I'll be straightforward. Let me put it this way. I don't have a belief in God. However, and this is very important, I don't deride people who believe in God, and I don't make fun of or think people are stupid or something for believing in God. There are a lot of really intelligent people who believe in God and so forth, and there are arguments, there are philosophical arguments. I'll put it this way: I don't see. I personally, for me, belief is. So let me put it this way: belief is. This is an interesting thing about belief. Belief, in order to believe something, you have to have an attitude toward it, right? It's not something where you just at will believe something. Isn't that true? I think it's true. You don't at will believe something. If somebody says, for instance, well, do you believe in this or that? And suddenly you can just change your belief to, yes, I believe in it, or no, I don't believe in it. It takes some exploration, right? It takes some, it is an attitude, right? And so the question of whether I believe in it is, it's not something that I just can switch off and on to believe or disbelieve, right? The position I take is I have not been, I think in evidence and I think in logical deduction, and I haven't seen, I'll put it this way, and I think this is a really reasonable approach to take. I haven't seen an argument that would convince me as to a belief in that. And so because of that, I don't believe in it. I mean, it's the same reason I don't believe that extraterrestrials exist. Could they? I mean, they certainly could. We would need evidence, and I think in that case, extraterrestrials, maybe the probability is pretty high, and all of that, that they do. But I haven't been presented with, enough evidence to say that that's true. So how do I know? And so I leave it up to, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. So, don't your parents, Nikhil, no. I mean, when I was young, I was a Catholic, so I was raised Catholic. So I went to Catholic school. So, but when I was in Catholic school, I actually would sit in Catholic school. Let me tell you a funny story. I would sit in the religion class. We had religion class. And I would sit in the religion class, and I would be a little bit of a troublemaker because the teacher would say something. But I learned not to do this because I realized I would get in trouble eventually. But she would say, and this in the Bible. And I'm not meaning to be disrespectful if you believe in it. But like I would always say, well, how do you know that? I remember distinctly a few times, like, well, how do we know that? How do you know that? And I would get in trouble. So I very quickly realized, I shouldn't say, how do you know that, right? But I think there are a lot of great religious scholars out there who are open to that questioning. I think the best religious scholars out there are open to that questioning. And how do you know that? Great question, they'd say, right? Well, and they make an argument, right? So anyway, it's a different discussion. Bohi, I studied Bayesian, and yes, I say Bayesian, not Bayesian. I mean, both are fine. I studied Bayesian probability in the stats book you mentioned. People read over self-help books. I've been reading. Great. Yeah, that's a great book. Explore Bayesian reasoning. Vaders. My favorite habits of theists is them thinking that just because they share, I'm going to believe. Okay. Hi, sir. Hey, Hasnain. Welcome. Zhang Sun. Who can we create gravity on spacecraft? Sorry, how can I don't know. I am not a cosmologist. And I don't know that physics. That's beyond me. Vaders, Pitbus. I recently had a conversation. Okay. Bohi, let's see. Is psychology or philosophy more useful to learn deeper for self-improvement? A lot of majors require an intro. Both. The answer is both, Bohi. I would say both are important for self-improvement because philosophy gets to the core questions. What is value? What is valuable? What's the meaning of life, right? These kinds of questions. What's our place in the universe and these kinds of things. But philosophy can marry nicely with science, with psychology, with a lot of different fields. And to answer those questions. So philosophy, for instance, asks a lot of these deep questions, but sometimes we need data from the sciences to be able to answer some of these questions. Sometimes we need, knowledge from anthropology or psychology or physics, right, or statistics to be able to answer some of these philosophical questions. So I would say both. Psychology is helpful for understanding how we behave, why we do what we do, right? Which is still not well understood, but yeah, I have respect for. Listen, I believe very strongly in religious freedom, right? I may not be religious myself, but religious freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. I'm all about. I would never say to somebody, I would never want a limitation on religious freedom. I know there are some people who would, ban religion or whatever. I don't believe that. I'm secular, right? I take that position, but you understand, limiting religious thought is the limitation of freedom of speech, and I am very big proponent of freedom of speech. I always believe that's the purpose of freedom of speech. If you think the idea is wrong, then you use your freedom of speech to counter it, right? That's the point. We combat what we think is bad speech with better speech, That's the point. And yeah, and that's how I teach my kids too. I remember I teach the kids in my class, right? That's the philosophy I bring forth. If because I actually believe, and there's again there is psychological grounding for this view. If you force somebody into a view, if you just say you can't think like this, you can't write on this, right? If I tell my kids that, what are they going to want to do? Not only are they going to be more curious about that point of view, one, but they might be more likely to adopt that point of view that I don't want them to adopt and do it rigidly because they're rebelling. They want to be contrarian, right? So that, and throughout history, that's what we've seen. You limit speech, you limit thoughts, you say you can't think this or you can't explore this point of view. People get people take these sides sometimes more rigidly. So yes, Goku fan, how do we become a polymath? I will actually have a video on this. I will have a video on this. I'm not going to answer that now because it's a very involved topic, but I'm seeing there's more interest in this question, so I probably will make a full video on this. Mohammed, I really appreciate this. Thank you for your honesty, but I do believing in a non-dogmatic way is important. I hope we would be guided with sincerity. Yeah, absolutely. I agree too. So, and if you have points of view, I love hearing different points of view. Bohi, I'm trying to work in high-frequency trading, so I think I can say I have expertise in finance, stats, and computer science, but I'm not sure about economics or psychology or philosophy. So economics probably would be your priority to get a broader understanding of what you're doing here in high-frequency trading. Philosophy would be helpful. I think they all would be helpful, but let me just see. If you had to pick an engineering field that mixes philosophy and physics, what would that be? Oh, good question. Philosophy and physics. I mean, I think all of physics is philosophical. I think all of physics has philosophical implications. So I would say all of it. I mean, probably. I mean, maybe quantum physics. Maybe quantum physics. So. So Bohi, like with web dev, you can learn the skill without studying computer science curriculum, but by extension of learning web dev, okay, yeah, right. So, yeah, it might be centripetal fluid. I don't know. Zhang, it's a good question. Look it up. I don't know that level of physics in terms of like spaceship. How you create conditions on a spaceship, I don't know. So I don't want to speak it incorrectly. It's not my area of expertise. But Vaders, can the same happen if you add or support your personal stances? Yeah, of course. Yes. So I'm not saying that you're not going to have rigid stances if you don't freely express your opinions. For sure, we will. But for instance, banning books, right? The French before the French Revolution, or like in different regimes. French Revolution comes to mind right away. It actually had the effect of making those banned books, more popular. And if you look at some research on psychology, it does make those views even more tempting to adopt. Makes the views more tempting to want to actually take the position rather than explore the position. People tend to actually want to take the position because this person's rejecting it, so it must be right. That's kind of like the conclusion, right? Yeah, so algebra, calculus is philosophical. There are philosophical implications in everything. How MCQ and competitive exams are designed, how to master them. Is that an India exam? I don't know. I'm not familiar. So welcome Focus Master, welcome, and BNV Finance Fixer. So this was actually kind of a long live stream today, guys, but yeah. guys, if you want to check out my channel, subscribe to my channel, guys, watch more of my content. Feel free to reach out to me with ideas or questions. I'm really, really happy to spend time with you. Also, if you want to work with me personally, we have the Critical Thinking Academy. You can find it anywhere on my channel in the video description, so check that out. And it's nice spending time with you guys every Wednesday. I'm here every Wednesday, so feel free to. Sorry if I didn't get to all of your questions today. All right, sorry if I didn't get to all of your questions today, but we will revisit. All right, we will revisit. Feel free to reach out to me, guys. Take care, guys. I appreciate all of you, and I'll talk to you soon.